To our next, please.
Mariam Opemi-Potaku. David Cameron says the UK is a Christian country and we should not be afraid to say so. Does the panel agree?
This was a speech he made today, Friday, in Oxford on the 400th anniversary of the King James Bible. He said exactly what Opemi-Potaku has just said. Evan Harris.
Well, I don't think that religion, Christianity or any other religion, has a monopoly on the things that we think are good. In fact, many of the approaches that religions take, like do unto others, were not invented by the religions that say that's their central tenet. It was a pre-religious finding, and it's obvious and logical. So I just think it's inappropriate or unwise for politicians to drape themselves or their values, and I'm sure David Cameron has decent values, in a religious language, because it tends to divide if you do that. There's nothing wrong with the values, and the Judeo-Christian ethic is one that's good on the whole. But remember, if you say that Britain is a Christian country because those people who declare their religion are mainly Christians, you may as well say it's a white country, or it's a heterosexual country. And I don't think that achieves anything. And we have an established church, of course, but it's an established church which means that our country is constitutionally linked to an organisation that doesn't think women are equal when it comes to being bishops, and doesn't think gay people deserve equal rights. And the Church of England is one of the more liberal religions in this regard.
You are yourself faith-free.
I'm secular.
You're secular.
So
yeah.
All I want, I don't mind. I never take the view that people shouldn't be religious, and I don't espouse atheism, but I do think we should separate religion and the state. I think if politicians want to have, advocate religion, that's fine. Good luck to them. I just think it's unwise for them to do so because it can be divisive.
I just want to come... Opemi-Potaku, I just want to come back to you for a second, because this is as I said at the beginning, this is a Church of England secondary school, but it's got, I can see in the audience, there's a lot of ethnic and I presume religious diversity at the school as well?
Yes, this is a multi-faith school, and I myself am a Muslim, so that's why I was really interested by what he said. And
I'm going to come back to you at the end. What's your own instinctive feeling about what he said? But then I'll come back to you after.
I just think personally that politics should be mixed with religion, because I think at the end of the day, Britain it's got diversity. So there's Hindus, there's Muslims, there's Christians, and I think in a way what he said is quite disrespectful.
You're a pupil at the school?
Yes, I am.
And Leslie.
Well, I don't think this is a Christian country, period. You look at the number of people who actually go to a Christian church, very few. But where we do see ourselves as a Christian country is because of the Judeo-Christian traditions. We admire the the wonderful music, the wonderful churches, the wonderful poetry and all that. I was brought up in a faith school, Roman Catholic, and gradually came to the conclusion the whole thing was nonsense. But I'm not like possibly Evan, and certainly his hero, Richard Dawkins, that somehow or other that a Christian tradition is in itself evil. I think actually a lot of the Christian traditions are the traditions we should all have, which, as we know, and of course Islam has a lot of them as well, because it was derived, frankly, so I hope I don't get a fatwa, it was derived from Christianity. So I think to go on about we are a Christian country is actually factually inaccurate. So it's ridiculous to say it, but the traditions, the architecture, the art, the music is part of our traditions, and we should cherish them.
Should we be afraid or not afraid to say, as the Prime Minister would, Michael?
I think he's just wrong.
I'm talking to Michael. Yeah, I know, you made it very clear.
I think he's just wrong.
Yeah, you've made it very clear, Anne. I just want to get Michael's view now.
I think what David Cameron said was profoundly historically accurate. It would have been even more accurate if he'd said we're a Protestant country. And begging the pardon of people in Scotland and Wales, it would have been even more accurate if you'd say we're fundamentally a Church of England country.
Why Church of England, given that it was a Catholic country until we got into the realms of Henry VIII?
Well,
I mean, why Protestant?
Precisely because of that, because Henry VIII was followed by Bloody Mary, so we were going back from Protestant to Catholic. It was a time of fanaticism. The country was being torn apart by religious dispute. And I credit Queen Elizabeth I with inventing the Church of England, a wishy-washy, middle-of-the-road church where people didn't have to resort to fanaticism, where people's different beliefs could be accommodated within a church that made very few demands. Queen Elizabeth said very particularly, "I'm not concerned with men's consciences. Let them have their consciences in private. That is not a matter for the state." Now, this understanding of religion is absolutely fundamental to the establishment of England and, by extension, to Britain. It is all about the understanding that religious fanaticism will tear a country apart. And the Church of England is precisely designed to avoid fanaticism tearing the country apart.
But is it right, to pick up on the point from our questioner, is it right for a politician, and indeed the Prime Minister, to say we want to have a revival of traditional Christian values to counter this country's moral collapse? Isn't that bringing together, I don't mean in constitutional terms, because it's already embedded the church, but bringing together a sense that there are particular values which are Christian, in the belief that those values are going to, if you're not ashamed to say it's Christian, are going to solve the problems or help solve the moral collapse as he sees it?
But I think it's extraordinary that this question is even asked. If you went to Saudi Arabia, no one would question whether that was a Muslim country. If you went to Spain, no one would question whether that was a Catholic country. Only apparently in this country do we have this ridiculous crisis of identity, which is brought about by some completely misplaced sense of political correctness. Let us assert what our tradition is, what our values are, and people who come to this country and people who come from other traditions will recognize what the core values of the country are and will relate to those core values. But to try and merge your core values with other values simply gives you a mishmash and makes the country represent nothing at all.
Michael, that's complaining about political correctness gone mad, okay? Because it's perfect. If you want to see If you want to see a country that isn't a theocracy, because I think we'd all agree that theocracies are bad ideas, so if you want to see a country where there is separation, but where politicians go on about religion all the time, usually by the time of their third marriage, fifth affair, and all that sort of thing, go look at the United States. And I don't want to see that sort of politics creep into this country.
There's no
That's
danger
the risk of politicians seeking for electoral advantage to cloak themselves in religion, whether it be the moderate religion that I accept the Church of England has, or whether it be more extremist. It's just wise to keep it out.
Andrew Motion.
Well, we manifestly don't live in a country which is Christian in practice, but equally manifestly we live in a country in which a great many of our important and central traditions were formed by things to do with Christian faith. So, in a way, the Prime Minister is right to say that we live in a Christian country, but it's much more to do, as I think Michael was meaning to say, though I would wish to make the point in slightly different terms, to do with what we've inherited than it is to do with our present. I suspect that his remarks about this have something to do with it being the 400th anniversary of the King James Version of the Bible. I mean, this seems to me what's really lying behind this. And perhaps he said what he said in support of the Secretary of State for Education, having, I think, recently arranged to get a copy of the King James Version of the Bible in every school in the country, with a foreword by himself, which is an interesting piece of editorializing.
Go on.
And actually, I would just quickly want to say, as an end to this, that I think that the King James Version of the Bible, though written in a language which will be quite difficult for a lot of people these days because it is 400 years old, nevertheless has a kind of resonance in its poetry that allows us to remember that quite often we can understand things in our hearts without necessarily understanding them word by word, and that book, the King James Version of the Bible, is itself a really crucial part of these traditions, which I suspect the Prime Minister was meaning to re-emphasise.
I just wanted to defend David Cameron from the charge that Evan makes, because I don't think it's true that he's trying to, make a political point here. I mean, our thinking on this has changed so much so quickly. I think we just need to, rest and find our ethical bearings again. If any Prime Minister up to and including, I don't know, Heath, Thatcher, had not said that this is a Christian country, people would have been amazed. And now somehow, in a very short period of time, for a Prime Minister to make what I think is a statement of the obvious is somehow regarded as
Why
amazing.
do you think he says we shouldn't be ashamed to say so? Is it because he fears that what you've described as these changes are powerful and are seizing the argument?
They have been powerful, they have seized the argument, but I think they're possibly in reverse. We all know the classic cases of political correctness, that you're not allowed to mention Christmas and cards that you send out at this time of year mustn't mention the word Christmas and things like this. Absolute nonsense, as though my Jewish friends wouldn't send out New Year's cards at the time of their New Year. Quite extraordinary.
Just lastly, back to Opemipo. Opemipo, I'm sorry.
Opemipo.
I beg your pardon. The emphasis on the emipo.
Yes.
Got it.
Well, thank you for what you said, but I'm still of the opinion that I think regardless if he's just trying to reinforce the fact that, Britain's a Christian country, I think it's important to not mix, politics with, religion, because at the end of the day, there are, other, religious groups in this country. And if you're saying that, the UK is a Christian country, where did other religions stand? That's what I'm going to say.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to just ask our audience here, which is mixed, not scientifically selected, in this Church of England school, who has sympathy with the thought that the Prime Minister expressed that this was a Christian country and we should not be ashamed to say so. Would you put your hands up, those who are sympathetic on the whole to what he said? Those who are not sympathetic to what he said? Well, in this school, this Church of England school, there's a majority. I'm not saying you're all Church of England scholars here, but you clearly aren't. Some of you a little bit more grown up than that, or older anyway, if not more grown up. And anyway, the majority here largely is not in favour of what he said. We'll go to our next question, please.
People who declare their religion are mainly Christians, you may as well say it's a white country or it's a heterosexual country. And I don't think that achieves anything. And we have an established church, of course, but it's an established church which means that our country is constitutionally linked to an organisation.
To our next, please.
Mariam Opemipo Ataku. David Cameron says the UK is a Christian country and we should not be afraid to say so. Does the panel agree?
This was a speech he made today, Friday in Oxford, on the 400th anniversary of the King James Bible. He said
David Cameron has decent values in a religious language because it tends to divide if you do that. There's nothing wrong with the values, and the Judeo-Christian ethic is one that's good on the whole. But remember, if you say that Britain is a Christian country because those...
He said exactly what Opemipo has just said. Evan Harris.
Well, I don't think that religion, Christianity or any other religion, has a monopoly on the things that we think are good. In fact, many of the approaches that religions take, like do unto others, were not invented by the religions that say that's their central tenet. It was a pre-religious finding, and it's obvious and logical. So I just think it's inappropriate or unwise for politicians to drape themselves or their values, and I'm sure